Welcome to the SOB radio show, where we have fun, interesting guests, and hot topics. Each week, we offer insights into music, fashion, health, fitness, and humor. Do you have the perfect guest for us to interview? I want to know. Drop me a line on our Facebook page at SpunkyOldBroad1 or reach out to me on our website at spunkyoldbroad.com. And now, back to the show. I am back with Jane Jenkins Herlong. She is a former Miss South Carolina, and she is a fabulous speaker and humorist and a magnificent singer. I mean, you really need to listen to her if you ever can, because she's fabulous. But you've got a book, your latest book, which I did read, called Rhinestones on My Flip-Flops. How did you come up with that?
I had more fun with that book. I thought about how life truly is a series of flip-flops and how we handle changes and surprises and the unexpected. And so I always say, when life flips, don't be a flop. Put rhinestones on the flip-flops, and then you can help other people handle their flip-flops. Because, Gayle, you know how we are as women. I look for those wow women, I call them, the women of wisdom. I have a section on that in my book. But my goodness, when things happened and my mother was so sick, or my son, I was concerned about him, you call these wonderful women that are older and wiser, and you just sit at their feet and say, help, help me. I've had flip-flop, and they'll always send you off with them. I call it the sparkle and shine. And I think that is the greatest gift we can give to each other, is just listening and grieving with people. I mean, I'm 3 doors down from our drugstore, and we had a terrible loss. The guy that we all adore, nicest guy in the world, and his wife found him. He passed away in their kitchen that morning. And this whole community, it's a big giant flip-flop. I'm just telling you, we're all grieved. And we all went to the drugstore and just cried. You know, I mean, that's what you do when you love people. The Bible says that, you know, we grieve with one another. And so that's really a real hit we've taken. But that's just life. Life is going to throw us some curves. And so that's kind of how I came up with the topic. And I decided to go back to the biblical women that we all sit in Sunday school and learn about, like Eve, deceived Eve, I called her, and domestic diva Martha. She's the Southern woman who tried to make everything perfect. And by the time the event rolled around, she was exhausted and hated it. That's me. And then whiny Naomi, the middle-aged woman that loves to tell you everything that's wrong. And, of course, God restored Naomi beautifully. And then you've got Mother of Nations, Sarah, who was like me in a way. I couldn't have children. And then God blessed us with 2 children. And then salty Mrs. Lot, whose life changed, and she didn't want to move ahead. She wanted to hold on to that path. So that's kind of what I did. I picked out the iconic women, and I told stories on myself and funny stuff.
Well, you know, it's interesting, a couple of things that you've said. I know you are a woman of faith, and so how do you factor that faith into your writings?
Well, I'm writing a new book, and I mentioned it already, the Don't Throw Tomatoes at My Field of Dreams. And the first thing I thought of was the scripture about the sower. And that is the greatest scripture, whether you believe that what the Bible has to offer or not. Whatever you sow, you better believe it, you're going to reap. So that is a universal principle. If I went down to the little chicken place, we have a really good chicken place, but if I ate nothing but fried chicken all week, I would pay a price. Let me just tell you.
Sounds good, though.
Yeah, boy, is it good. Sowing and reaping. If I want to have good children, I administer good practices of my character. I live it so my children can see me living my discipline. Thomas is a great man of character. So if I sow bad seed, and I'll use this as an example because this is in my back door and it makes me sad, but my brother is in his 70s and he is addicted to crack cocaine. And I hate it for him. He's the nicest guy, but he fights that battle all the time. And he went to treatment yet again, and we thought this time it would really stick. And he started sowing seeds of good seeds. And He is wanting a good return. He will get a good return. But Thomas, my husband, is so wise. I said, here he is sowing good seeds, Thomas. He said, yes, he is, but his fields are so much smaller. I thought, oh my gosh, that is so true. So I will put that in my books because I think it's a universal life lesson. When I speak, I'll say that the Proverbs say in one proverb, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but a crushed spirit will dry your bones. Now, how true is that, Gayle?
Oh,
How
absolutely.
true is that? And when you are negative and when you are stressed and when you are overcome, your immune system is compromised and stuff that lay dormant can pop up. I have one of my best friends was under enormous stress from a mother in a nursing home to a situation with her brother. It was awful. And literally, this was about 6 months ago, she woke up and she was deaf, profoundly deaf, both ears. And
Wow.
the doctor told her, he said, you know, you had something in your immune system that was compromised and this grew in you. It just came full circle. I saw it. My sister, I don't mean to be talking sad stuff, but my sister passed away prematurely right after my mother died. And I can tell you it was from a lot of stress, a lot of jealousy, which was so stupid because she was so smart and so talented, and a lot of anger. And sometimes when I'm speaking, I just feel like God taps me on the shoulder and says, say it. And I know what it is because I've been down that hard road. And I will say, there's somebody that needs to hear this. I don't know who you are, but you've got to forgive. Even when it doesn't make sense, you do that for you. That's who you do it for. And you would not believe the people that come up to me afterwards and say, oh my gosh, I needed to hear that. So I love to weave in principles that I think are profound, that are true. And I think people are hungry for that. And you don't have to beat them over the head with the Bible. I don't do that. And if I had to preach, just shoot me. Just shoot me. But I will throw out some wisdom that I feel like is offered, as John Maxwell says, in the Great Scrolls. I believe in that.
Well, I have to say that forgiveness was probably the biggest thing I've learned in later life. I always was so busy building a business and building an empire and doing all the things I did. I mean, I ended up, my first business, I had 7 offices, Jane, and 350 people, which I never want to do again. But I
Gracious.
mean, it was something, and I sold that to go into speaking full time. That's what happened because I used to book Bill Gove and Sam Edwards all the time because I had a convention service company. And so I booked them for the conventions that came to South Florida. And they kept telling me that I needed to join NSA because I was a better speaker than they were, which of course wasn't true. But I kept saying, well, I can't do that. I've got this business. So finally, Sam, who always came to my house for Thanksgiving, because he didn't have anybody else. So I always invited him. And finally, he said, you're going. So I went and found out I could make a living at it and promptly came back and sold my business. And my husband said to me, what are you going to do now? I said, I'm going to be a speaker. He said, what is that? I said, well, that's when you get in front of a group and you speak. And he said, I hear you talk all the time. Who on earth would pay you to do that? So, but I was so busy all the time building businesses. And when somebody did me wrong, I really was upset. And in my later years, I would say in the last dozen years, I have learned forgiveness. And it is one of the biggest lessons that I have ever learned. And it has made life a lot easier and simpler. So I think that's important. The other thing that I wanted to ask you about was, this is a program for women 50 plus, and so many of the women that I'm sure you've encountered, although you were talking about the wise women, down the block from you, so many people consider their life over when they hit 50, and when they hit 60, and when they hit 70. What do you say to those people? I mean, I think life is just beginning.
Oh, I just say, bless your heart, sugar. Really. I mean, I know people that think their life's over after the child goes to college. I mean, I'm thinking, good heavens. I mean, you need to be growing as a woman of wisdom. And in my third book, I call it Bury Me with My Pearls, because I think symbolically speaking, we should have the most incredibly eclectic strand of life's circumstances. And when we handle them, we put it on the strand. We should have a dark pearl, thus the stuff that we manage to make it through hard times. And we need to be able to symbolically hand it off to the next generation. We need to have irregular pearls. We need to be able to laugh at life circumstances that we can't control. So I think you are cheating yourself and so many people around you if you don't continue to grow in wisdom and be the go-to person. I want to be a go-to person to help other women and get them to get on the bandwagon to don't you'd let your dreams pass you by. There'll be a time when you can't physically do what you wanted to do maybe 10, 15 years ago. You're just tired, or you might have an ailment of some sort. But I just tell people, don't let a number stop you. Don't let it stop you. I mean, my good friend Virginia Honeycutt, I love her. I was just on my Facebook page and saw memories, and she was an amazing human being. And then my gynecologist, God bless him, Dr. Gayle Watson, I was still going to him, and he was practicing gynecology at 101.
Oh my gosh.
I loved old Gayle. I'm telling you, you know what got him was they made him retire because he backed out of the parking lot and hit like 4 cars. And so that was it. But he could, well, this might be crude to say, but he could do a pap smear. He just couldn't back up a car, whatever. I loved him.
Well, I agree. I agree with all of that because I think that there are people I think people are old at 20 and I think people are young at 80. So I think it depends on the person. But you always seem to include handling difficult people by using an analogy of doing the hokey pokey.
Yes.
So what is that all about? It sounds interesting and fun.
Well, that little bumper sticker that said, what if the hokey pokey is really what it's all about? And I'm thinking, well, there you go. That's it right there. Because if you do the right thing, Gayle, and that's put your right foot in, regardless of what happens. And that my right foot experience was and it's kind of a sad deal, but when my daddy passed away, and I had a family member very close to me, who just shocked me to pieces. In my immediate family, tried to get everything redone to advantage them, and my mother had to take action to protect herself. It was pathetic, but a lot of people thought I was awful, and I don't really care because I stood up for what my daddy and my mother put in writing for the surviving spouse. But to me, I can rest my head at night and have no regrets because of one thing: I did the right thing. I put my right foot in. And
well,
a lot of
that's
people,
so true. That's so true. I went through this with a speaker friend of ours. I was named as her executor of her estate, and people came out of the woodwork who had all kinds of demands, and I had to deal with them.
Absolutely.
I mean, they were threatening. Oh, I'm this person who takes advantage of elderly people. They should know I'm an elderly person as well, and that I do all these things. And oh, I mean, it just went on and on. It was just terrible. But I don't believe people do things like that, but they do. They do.
Oh my gosh. And my mother said if we didn't have anything, and it wasn't a massive estate, believe me. I said, Mama, people fight over a clock, a cuckoo clock. It depends on the person's character. So I said, you get the wrong people with the wrong values in a situation, it's going to come up. It's going to bubble to the top. So I just stayed firm. And to this day, I have people that I keep on the outside of my life, and I've forgiven them, but they're not coming on the inside. They're going to stay on the periphery. I mean, they're lucky to get a spot on the edge of the radar screen, because I'm going to be principled and I'm going to have high principled thinking, and I'm certainly not going to engage in low functioning reacting. And I think that's very important. But you've got to protect yourself. You've got to protect your heart and the gifts God gives you. And I was raised back in the Gullah culture down in the Sea Islands of South Carolina. And the woman that worked for my family for 50 years was a second mom to me. And her name was Tootsie, and she spoke fluent Gullah, and I loved her to death.
I've never heard of that. What is that?
Yeah, it's a low country dialect, mostly by the African American culture. But my grandfather spoke it, My daddy spoke it because he had people working on the farm. And then Tootsie was, like I said, she was my second mom. And she would always say that God done give you sugar. Don't let nobody take away that sugar that God done put in your heart. And that's
Oh,
Gullah.
oh, wow. That's
And what
amazing.
she's saying is that God gives you gifts. Don't let people destroy the goodness that God has blessed you with, the talents, the gifts. So she was totally right on, and I'll never forget that. But I
Wow.
learned a lot from her.
You know,
So
it is true. I mean, it's amazing how people are so, I don't know, they're jealous of other people's success. I can say that I'm envious of some people. I can say that, but that doesn't mean I don't wish them well. It means I am envious of what they've accomplished, but I don't say they don't deserve it, and I don't say that they're not going to get their recognition. But I mean, there are people who I would love to emulate and have their successes, but you know, I am who I am, and that's what I get. So if you were saying that you would like our audiences to walk away with something from Jane, what would it be? What do you want them to take away from this interview?
I guess it would be the message of the flip flop book. And it would be to be able to find the good, to grow. And I always say that life is like a tube of toothpaste with a key at the bottom, and that's the stress and strain of life. And I think as life puts pressure in things and life is pressured, whatever comes out the top of that toothpaste is your character. And you better either like it or fix it. So when things happen, and I mean, really, Gayle, I mean, I remember saying, oh, I'm patient. Yeah, I was not patient when my child had a throwdown at Walmart at the checkout line. I can tell you right now, I thought I was. But the lesson in that is you can talk until the cows come home about you're this, you're that, you're forgiving, you're loving. I mean, you have an opportunity that really challenges that, you better pay attention to it. And I think that's God's sign that you need to do some changing and to piggyback on that hokey pokey message. So if you do the right thing and if you can shake things off. Now, a lot of times women like to carry it and tell everybody about it 100 more times. Shake it off and turn it around. In other words, look at it from another perspective. And I tell a little story, and I tell it a lot when my husband went a trip to Puerto Rico, and we were in this beautiful property and having the best time. It was a banquet event one evening, and this woman walked up drunk with her little glass of courage and just cussed my husband out. I mean, we were just staring at her like, what? And I kept saying, what did he do to you? And she said, oh, he knows. And Thomas said, I said, what did you do to her? He said, I don't even know. But we got to the bottom of it, and it was some kind of council that he was serving on, which was an honor. And she didn't get selected, and it was just ridiculous. And she kept saying the word that just kept ringing in my ear, Gayle, 8 years ago, 8 years ago. And I said, girl, stop this bus, honey. You've been thinking this and carrying this venom for 8 years. And she was pathetic. And I said, you know, there are people you can sit down with and have a counseling session. And I've been to therapy. I mean, I lost my mother and my sister 5 months apart. You better believe I was in therapy. I wanted to grieve well. And I encourage all women, if they have something that they can't shake off, help somebody to help you shake it off. Life is just too joyous and too special to let those things hold you back. So I tell that story, and that, you know, she asked me if I was a psychologist after she calmed down. I said, no, I'm a professional speaker, and I'm going to tell everybody what you just did. That probably wasn't nice. But when I walked off, I was the one that was angry. It was like all that venom jumped on me. And Thomas was as calm, and he looked at me and said, Jane, she's got a problem. But I refused to let her problem be my problem. See, that was the shaking it off business.
Yeah,
And
you
so
know,
I tell, you know, going back to the hotel room, I fired up my laptop, had to email all my girlfriends. I was riding on that wheel of misfortune, you know. Thomas was high up in bed, and I just blurted out, is that all you have to say? And the next thing I heard was, he was sound asleep snoring. So he
well, yeah.
truly shook that puppy off. So that was a lesson to me, that don't carry things and don't keep reliving things. And women love to do that.
Well, you're absolutely right, because I was giving a speech, and we finished, and we were doing Q&A, and this woman was talking about her mother this and her mother that and blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, I said, is your mother still alive? And she said, no. And I said, well, how long ago did she pass away? Thinking she'd say 6 months, a year. 35 years ago. The woman had been carrying this for 35 years, and it had shaped her entire life. And that's great if it's to the positive, but when it's to the negative, I mean, that's just something I can't even believe. So anyway, I had my say, and my sister was there with me because it was close to where she lived, and she always said, if you're speaking where I can drive to, I'll come. And she's a psychotherapist, so she was all ready to jump up and give her clinical analyzation. And she said, but you did fine, Gayle. She said, you said it in very much, common sense English that she could understand. She said, I was all going to have all these terms, and she said, but you said it just the way it should have been said. So, but you are absolutely right. Women hold on to things forever and ever and ever, and they'll see things like, can you believe? Do you know what this person said? Do you know what this person did? Do you know? And they're telling it to people who can't do a thing about it.
Oh, I know it.
Men brush it off. Men just
Yes,
brush it off.
they do. And I don't know, Susie Humphreys, don't you?
I do, yes.
I love her. Oh my gosh. But she and I were speaking at a conference. It was several years ago. And this woman looked just so drawn and terrible looking. And Susie, you don't mess with Susie now. She's just a hip shooting Texan. And the woman was talking about she's depressed. And Susie said, what's wrong with you? She said, well, I'm just depressed. My husband did me wrong. She said, when? She said 30 years ago, like that. She said, you know what? Why are you depressed? It's because you haven't forgiven him. Depression is anger turned inward. Now you go and call him right now and you forgive him. I couldn't believe she said it. And do you know that woman the next day, it was like somebody had lifted a load off of her. She looked different. She said, I did what you said. And she said, I feel so much better. Just like you said, Gayle. It's just a great way to live your life by not carrying all this grief and bitterness. It's so sad. And that's why that proverb to me is so powerful, that a crushed spirit will dry your bones. That's true.
Yeah, it is. Well, I can tell you, I'm sure that people are going to want to know how to get a hold of you, Jane. So where should they go to find you? And what do you have that our audiences would love to get? Tell them a little bit about what there is available from you that they might want to purchase or even could download. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, you can go to my website, which is Jane Herlong, HERLONG.com, and go to store, STORE, and there's everything listed. Also, Amazon, if you type in my name, Jane Herlong, or Jane Jenkins, JENKINS, Herlong, lots of stuff comes up there, DVDs, CDs, and the Rhinestone book, I was very blessed. It is available through most large bookstores, which is like Books A Million and Target and Walmart. You can order it from there, and of course, Amazon. So, and I appreciate that, Gayle, because it's not to me about, and I mean, my speaking fees aren't enormous. And when I sell a book, I mean, I've got 100 books I just sold at cost because I love this group is going to hire me for that. I'm doing a humorous talk for them. But I love people to read it and just to come up to me and just squeeze my hand or just say, gosh, Jane, I needed that story on page 42, or that other story on page 18 was really great. And, it's to me, I feel like, to me, without using a Bible to beat people over the head, what you do is a ministry, what I do is a ministry. It's our way of reaching people and helping people become a better version of themselves.
Well, that's true. So what you need to do, folks, if you are interested, and I think from listening to Jane, she has a lot of wisdom in that humor. If you go to Jane Herlong, HERLONG.com, see what she's all about, go to her store, see what she has available for you. I think you'll be very, very pleased. And if you ever get a chance to be in a position where you could bring a speaker in like Jane, do so. If you ever have an opportunity to listen to her sing, do so. And if you ever want to say, well, I knew a Miss South Carolina, you can do that too, because Jane is one of the most gracious people I know, and I think that you would be absolutely amazed with everything that she has accomplished. So I think I want to thank you so much for being with us, Jane. I mean, it has been an absolute delight, and I have to say that I can see why you are so popular on Sirius. I can see why you are popular with the people that you speak to, and why so many people do suggest you for a speaker, because I think you're a gas. I'll tell you that.
Well, you're so sweet. I appreciate it, Galen. Thank you for inviting me to be on this show with you, and it truly has been a privilege. And I do thank you.
Well, thank you so much.